For some people, eliminating the foods is unsustainable for a very long time. There's definitely some excellent patients, people that are really diligent and they're persistent and they won't give up and they've got willpower. But I would say most people, you get them well for a while and then they slip back and then they go into their old habits again. And then again, their symptoms are going to return or their illness patterns are going to return.
Welcome to the Myers Detox Podcast. I'm Dr. Wendy Myers, and on this podcast, we explore everything related to toxins and heavy metal detoxification, the health issues caused by these toxins that are ever pervasive in our environment. And we also discuss, things like emotional trauma. We discuss bioenergetics and anti-aging and many more advanced topics related to health, helping you figure out those missing pieces of the puzzle. It's your health puzzle. Today we have Dr. Ray Jin on the show, and we're going to be exploring allergies and food sensitivities and the underlying root causes. And it's not what people think. So really, really interesting show today. You need to pay attention if you have food sensitivities or just find like you just can eat fewer and fewer and fewer foods, have a lot of digestive issues and mystery symptoms that you can't seem to pinpoint. So today we're going to be talking basically about why food sensitivities are on the rise. It's due to environmental toxins, processed foods, pesticides, overloaded immune systems, and emotional trauma, surprisingly. We'll talk about the conventional approaches like elimination diets and how this can have limitations in sustainability and really not addressing the root cause. And we'll also talk about, how, those diets are also focused on the top 10 foods like gluten, dairy, corn, and soy, when you can really be sensitive to any food, including a blueberry, and how 40 to 50% of patients tend to revert to their old eating habits, even if they have an initial improvement, because it's hard to avoid foods that, you really enjoy eating. And we'll talk about how Ray has pinpointed how food sensitivities have an emotional trigger similar to PTSD, but with food association. And we discuss what's termed neuro-emotional technique, or NET, used to identify and release these emotional triggers, and how Ray in his practice combines these emotional components with foundational health improvements like liver detox, liver flushes, and gut repair with a lot of success in his practice. Our guest today, Dr. Ray Jin, he's a graduate of the Southern California University of Health Sciences, and he's a certified functional medicine practitioner, has been in private practice for 25 years. He maintains a practice in Laguna Hills, California. He's a published author, media personality, and lectures nationwide, and previously he was also a radio host for a primetime talk show on health. Previously a noted research molecular biologist, Dr. Jin brings that same passion and curiosity in finding answers that helped him succeed in the lab to his patients. And he blends the latest technologies from functional medicine, functional nutritional therapy, energy medicine, mind-body approaches, and uses his experience as a board-certified chiropractor, traditional naturopath, quantum neurobiology certified practitioner, certified neuro-emotional technique doctor, and certified functional medicine practitioner to customize healthcare programs that will get people maximum results. Jin discovered the connection between food intolerances and sensitivities and significant emotional trauma over 14 years ago, and these helped many people regain their ability to enjoy foods and previously triggering environmental things again. And his research for methods to help bring this liberating process to more people who suffer has brought him to develop the groundbreaking emotional allergy technique. You can learn more about Dr. Ray's work at emotionalallergy.com. Ray, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Wendy, for having me. Pleasure to be on.
Yes, yeah. So I've had you on before, so you guys love what you're hearing. You can listen to my previous episode with Ray. And so let's talk about food sensitivities. So a lot of people are dealing with this. This is on the rise. I think the approaches with conventional medical doctors does not work very well, and it's expensive. And I know people have to go get shots every week and just really not a very viable solution long term. And there's so many options to address food sensitivity. So why don't you tell us first just what exactly is the definition of a food sensitivity?
Absolutely. Well, the thing that you just mentioned is you're talking about people that actually know they have a food sensitivity or food allergy, and some people have no clue. So us in the functional holistic world, that's a really big part of what we're dealing with because it can lead to inflammation and gut issues and things like that. But for example, everyone knows what a food allergy is. Like if you eat peanuts and you have anaphylactic shock, or you eat lobster or shrimp and you can't breathe and all that. So people know that. But then there's the kind of the thing is everyone lumps them kind of into the same thing: food sensitivities, food intolerances, food allergies, but they're all slightly different. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit more today is more the food sensitivities and intolerances, and the way it shows up in our practices, in the functional practices, is not people know they have it, but it's usually in the symptoms that they have. So it'll be things like they'll be tired, or they may have digestive issues, they may have joint pain, they may have brain fog, they may have depression, anxiety. So those are the symptoms, but then the really underlying issue is there might be an inflammatory response, or some other sort of response the body has to food that's just throwing the body out of whack. So that's why it's kind of difficult for most people to even know that they have a food sensitivity or intolerance. And again, functional medicine doctors and those in the functional world, that's one of the big things that we find with people, and we generally put them on things like elimination diets, like getting rid of gluten or dairy, and people have heard of that. So that's how it's been showing up for us. Because I would say there's probably 2 out of 10 people that actually come in and say, I have a food intolerance or sensitivity. Most other people come in with symptoms. I'm tired. My gut doesn't feel good. I'm depressed. I'm anxious, and my brain fog. And those are usually how it presents. And you doing detox protocols, I know you know this stuff. So.
Yeah, yeah, I know when I eat something I'm sensitive to, I end up getting heartburn. So that's a telltale sign. And that's very, like lightning striking you. Hey, don't eat that food. But I also will get brain fog, and I'll also get throat clearing as well. Kind of your body will respond by producing mucus, and that's really annoying. But for a lot of people, they may not have a reaction for up to a week after they eat
Absolutely.
that food, and it's can be very far removed from the consumption of that food, and it can be tricky. So I think it's really important to look at your food sensitivities or your immune system functioning. So I know when you go to a medical doctor, they're looking more at allergies. They're not necessarily looking at sensitivities, but it's something that needs to be looked at. I mean, something that definitely needs to be addressed, because not everyone has outright allergies to things. They might have those subclinical symptoms you're talking about. And so let's talk about, why this is on the rise. Like, why are food sensitivities on the rise? And it's more and more common because I know that and I'm lumping food sensitivities and allergies together here, but I know there's so many more peanut allergies. There's so many kids with the nut-based allergies, and my daughter's gone to schools. You're not allowed to bring nuts at all, and there's kids with these severe reactions. But that's on the rise, but also food sensitivities is on the rise. Why is that?
Well, there's gonna be like multitudes of reasons, and I'm gonna pick your brain because I know you work in this world too. Um, but I'll give you some conceptual things first. Um, so the thing is, as you know, our body, the way our body is, it's a system, and it can be overloaded. So if it's overloaded, then the body just doesn't respond well. All the usual functions that normally work well, they just don't work well. I mean, people know that when they own a computer, right? Like if you're doing too much, there's too many processes you're handling, your computer might just freeze. So the things that normally can do pretty easily and efficiently, it just isn't able to do them very well. So the body's the same way. Now, the one thing, so again, to use a computer analogy, you've been using computers for a while, right, Wendy? Maybe 20, 30 years or so. Yeah.
Well, for actually 40 years.
40
My dad
years.
my dad
Okay.
was a computer programmer, so we had like
Ah,
we had the first Mac.
got it.
The
Got
very
it.
first one with the little tiny screen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember those old computers before like the Pentium chips? What I forgot what they're like 356. I don't remember the terminology. But okay, well, instead of use computer, let's use an iPhone. Okay. I think the iPhone edition one, right? And if anyone still has one of those, it's worth a lot of money, by the way, I think. But the thing is, if you try and run the software, that's or the apps or whatever on an iPhone 1, it just won't work. Or if you try and run an app right now, even on an iPhone 5, it's going to work, but not really well. So what happens is our bodies haven't really changed very much. We're still an iPhone 1, right? But we live in a world where the environment and everything around us and the pace of everything is like iOS 17. I mean, everything's just going at rapid speed.
My body
Um,
is definitely iOS 1 for
yeah,
sure.
well, all our bodies are because we don't get hardware upgrades, right? I mean, we do through evolution, but it takes, you know, hundreds of years where our environment is not the same. I mean, okay, you being in the detox world, how many new chemicals are put out in the world every year, right?
Yeah.
Like tens of
Thousands.
thousands that
Yes.
the body's never seen before. And it's like, it's hard to keep up. So that's one thing. The foods, as you know, they're not the same foods anymore. I mean, like if you get wheat, unless it's like heirloom wheat or maybe wheat from like Europe or something, it's hybridized. It's like a Frankenstein food compared to what our great grandparents used to eat. So that's another. And, what are they doing with everything? They're processing the crap out of everything. They're, making this and that and, hydrogenizing everything. And so again, our body's not used to these things. And here's another one. Um, we're globalizing. So it used to be that if you lived, say, you live in Texas, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I live in Southern California. Most of the time, I'm going to eat foods that are kind of regional to me. Same with you. You're going to eat things that you're used to. But
Okra is
oh,
regional.
okra, right? Yeah.
Black-eyed peas.
Yep, exactly. But now we live in a world where we're eating foods from everywhere. We're eating foods from Europe and South America and Mexico and Asia and everything. And again, our body may or may not be used to those things. Like for example, being Asian, a lot of Asians they don't do well with dairy because genetically they just don't really have the architecture or the genetics to make that enzyme for lactose. So they become intolerant. So that's why a lot of Asians actually have lactose intolerance. But so that's another reason. And then there's this really great researcher. She's a medical doctor. I think she's a medical doctor, PhD, Dr. Kari Nadow. She's kind of looked at why things have exploded, and from a kind of a research scientific standpoint, she has some really good theories. She thinks we're too clean, right? Kids used to. I'm sure you rolled around in the dirt when you were a kid, and played outside, and we do mud pies and do that stuff, and then we'd eat, and then we'd get dirty, and we'd
Yeah, you have a lot of stimulation. You have a lot
right.
of stimulation to your immune system.
Exactly. It wants to be able, it needs some stimulation to make it more robust.
And
It's like
training, it's training for that.
exactly, exactly. But what do mothers do with their kids now? It's like hand sanitizers for everything, and they're like ultra clean, and I mean everything's super clean. So that's one thing she theorized. Another is we're not outdoors as much. We're not around maybe animals. So she says maybe have more pets because same thing. You get you get exposed to, all those other things that the microbiome of pets have, some of their pathogens, which aren't going to kill you, but will again strengthen you. And she also says, a lot of times she feels most people, their skin is so dry that it's a barrier that, people need to use more moisturizer and things like that. But anyway, those are a few of the things. But if you kind of add them all together, I think again our body just it has to deal with so much more than our grandparents did, and each year it's getting worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I think
what are
toxins,
your thoughts? I
yeah,
mean,
I
what
think toxins play a huge role in that, especially with the just glyphosate alone. There's lots of research that shows it's like there's a direct correlation. The increase of glyphosate, we've seen the increase of immune-related disorders, allergies, asthma, food sensitivities, allergies, eczema, etc. Direct correlation is the more glyphosate in the environment, more health issues, and it's because it kills gut bacteria, a lot of things decimating the gut, and which is, a big part of your immune system, in addition to all the other toxins and things that are shown in the research to
and
um,
microplastics, right?
microplastics. Yeah, those all dampen immune
Yeah,
system response,
yeah. So it's like crazy. Like microplastics are showing up in our food, and you try and eat clean, and yet the fish you're eating is maybe like 5% plastic, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so our bodies just it's overloaded. It's just it's beyond the capacity of what's able to tolerate anymore. And so then the immune system is just gonna start attacking everything.
So for anyone listening that really wants to detox their body, go to heavymetalsquiz.com. I created a quiz for you. It only takes a couple of seconds. Based on some lifestyle questions, you can get your toxicity score and get a free video series that answers all of your frequently asked questions about how to detox your body. Check it out, heavymetalsquiz.com. Yeah, and then for a lot of functional doctors and practitioners and even medical doctors, perhaps, will put people on a food elimination diet. And I think you can suss out a few things, like the Big 10, like the top 10 food sensitivities, but that it sucks. It sucks going on a food elimination diet. And there's hundreds of foods to which you can be sensitive. So they're very limited. But you can get rid of deduce if you've got corn, wheat, or soy, or some of the nightshades are a problem. But yeah, there's problems with that. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
I think what you're referring to is how some of the medical doctors, holistic doctors, one of the strategies they use is elimination diets, which is very true. I mean, I would say there's not that many medical doctors that do that, but definitely in the functional world, we do that quite a bit. And the reason is because these foods tend to be inflammatory. And even in the medical world, inflammation is like the big no-no, right? Everyone talks about inflammation now. So reducing inflammation is really, really huge. Now, how do most traditional medical doctors do it? They might use anti-inflammatories or things that are going to suppress the inflammation. In the functional world, we may dampen inflammation using various strategies. But one strategy is actually food elimination and trying to identify which foods actually do inflame you. And you mentioned the big four: gluten, dairy, corn, and soy. Those are really, really big ones. So if your body doesn't attack those foods, then there's going to be less inflammation systemically. And invariably, when I do these elimination diets, so my practice is basically autoimmune related, chronic complex health issues. So most people, when we put them on a diet, it's going to be almost like an autoimmune paleo type of diet. So we remove a lot of the inflammatory foods. In invariably, I would say your average patient probably has one to three foods that they definitely are reactive to. And most of those reactive foods are the top 10 that you mentioned, Wendy. And what are those top 10 foods? They're usually the foods that we eat
At every meal.
at every meal, and then there are comfort foods, right? So if you have to remove gluten, so that's going to take away what your pizza, your pastas, your cakes, and cookies, and all those sorts of stuff, and then you and corns and everything, and dairy. Everyone loves their cheese here, and so yeah, if you remove all those, everyone's may feel better and get healthier, but they kind of hate it, right? When you say, um, and that's what I notice in practice as well, is when we would do that, we would find that there are certain foods that if they didn't eat, they would feel better, their health would improve, they'd get their wellness back, their symptoms would go away. But given the choice, I think they'd rather, have their foods again.
Yeah, I'd rather
So,
fix the underlying root cause for
well,
sure. That's what I'm all about.
they want to, I mean, they want to do that, but the pull to eat what we're used to eating is also really big. So that's the dilemma that almost everyone has. And for some people, eliminating the foods is unsustainable for a very long time. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I mean, there's definitely some excellent patients. I mean, people that are really diligent and they're persistent and they won't give up, and they've got willpower. But I would say most people, you get them well for a while and then they slip back and then they go into their old habits again. And then again, their symptoms are going to return, or their, illness patterns are going to return. So that's the problem that, I've seen in practice, even though eliminating foods and identifying which ones are they're intolerant and sensitive to is really, really important. But there's kind of a limitation to the sustainability in that. Do you notice that with people doing detox programs, eliminating the foods from those from their time doing the program, but then eventually they'll kind of go back into their old pattern?
Yeah, for
Now, if
sure.
you don't, you have an amazing population of just really diehard dedicated patients, but most of mine, I would say probably uh, 40 to 50% kind of go back to their old ways after a
Yeah, when
while.
it comes to food, it's a daily battle. I mean, it's a daily battle. I mean, at least in my opinion, for me, trying to avoid certain foods and eating lower carb and only eating organic and not going to this restaurant that I want to go to. And, there's a lot of landmines out there. And it's, yeah, I like my comfort foods for sure. But when it comes to like detecting food sensitivities, what kind of methods do you use? Because that can be, testing on a regular basis can get a little bit expensive. What methods do you use for that?
The gold standard in identifying food sensitivities and tolerances is the elimination provocation diet. That's just is the gold standard. Now, in my practice, I use various ways as well. We have some functional testing. We use the person's body to identify what goes on. Some people know that as muscle testing. That's one
Mm.
way. There's another doctor, Dr. Wally Schmidt. He does what's called indicator testing, and that's another way. So what happens is with people's range of motion, so if they eat something inflammatory, you can check someone's range of motion. And if they eat an inflammatory food, or you have them introduce inflammatory food into their system, you do the same range of motion check again, and it'll actually be a little bit limited. Like it won't be, they won't. The range of motion will decrease. It's really amazing, and they've done there's other ways in the holistic world too. Blood pressure. Blood pressure is another way, because when you eat a food, it's like your body goes into fight or flight because it feels like it's under stress. and then the blood pressure can actually change some. So there's many ways to do it, but in my practice, it's usually through elimination provocation, through either indicator testing. We use muscle testing to do that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it's amazing how people they go into that cortisol response and but some people get addicted to that. They eat that food because they want that cortisol response. They want that stimulation because it's, for whatever reason, they get a little bit of a high. And so let's talk about the underlying root causes of food sensitivities. And so you have a really interesting take on this. And so let's discuss that and kind of how you discovered that.
Absolutely. Now, I think in all your training, have you heard of the concept of the triad of health, Wendy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. One area where it's really prominent, where it's kind of the mantra, is in the world of applied kinesiology. It's one of the mother techniques in the functional alternative world. And in the triad of health, there's basically three sides to our health. So one side is going to be physical things, a second side is going to be chemical things, and then the third side is going to be emotional, mental things. Now, in many of the techniques and approaches I've learned over the years, they generally function on the physical or on the chemical. So chemical would be like nutrition, supplementation, herbs, homeopathic can be part of that sometimes. And then the physical might be chiropractic, acupuncture, exercise, other things as well. But the emotional aspect, a lot of people, they don't address too much other than, try and not be stressed, take some ashwagandha, things like that. But other than that, people don't look at that part too much. But all three of those are factors in any sort of uh, health or illness pattern. Like if we have issues, it's either it's going to probably have some of those three components. It might be a physical component, it might be a chemical component, it might be a mental component. Now, so what I do in my practice, again, with these people that have these autoimmune and chronic health issues, we do eliminate some of the foods. So that is the nutrition chemical part. As far as the physical stuff, we might address things with their acupuncture meridians, the energy flow in the body. If there's any imbalances in the body, we want to take care of those because people know that sometimes when the body's out of balance, it's going to affect the internal organs, the nervous system, the immune system. So we want to balance out as well. But the part that I found fascinating over the years is that there's many times where these food intolerance and sensitivities actually have an emotional component to it. And it's like conditioning, like Pavlov's dog. So we may eat something and then we have some sort of traumatic experience with it. And then our body can, associates that. So down the road, it may actually react in a negative way because it remembers that traumatic experience. So in a way, it's kind of like PTSD, but there's a food association.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, you cannot separate the emotions and emotional trauma from the physical body, and it affects it so much. I mean, there's an incredible mountain of evidence how emotional trauma affects the physical body. Kaiser Permanente did a 17,000 person study and found that 65% of people have physical health issues from emotional trauma, adverse childhood events. And they only tested 10. There's so many more. So that, a lot of scientists think that 65% is really, really low. And so how do you go about resolving this emotional trauma to get the favorable outcomes and reduce a reduction of the food sensitivities and reactions?
Well, the way I've been doing in practice so I've been in practice 25 years. One of the approaches I use is a mind-body emotional stress release technique. One of the things it does, it tries to identify what the original trigger or what the original trauma is. And then the technique allows us to release it. The one I used is called neuro emotional technique. It was founded by Dr. Scott Walker, who was a chiropractor. And the reason he was looking into that component was he felt that, especially in chiropractic, a lot of times you'll adjust someone, and then by the time they're down at the parking lot, the adjustment is already, back again. So he noticed that there a lot of times with people there was an emotional piece to why the body didn't hold that adjustment, or why the body would have a physical issue. So he developed originally for that, but then it seemed to apply to so many different things in our body. So I've been using that technique, and that technique allows me to identify what oftentimes for the person what the trauma is. And once we are able to disassociate that association, many times the people can eat the food again, or they're much less reactive. And in a lot of cases, the food sensitivity intolerance it's gone completely.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And the body, I just find the body so interesting, that there's so many different techniques out there to address the underlying root causes of so many issues that we really only think of as having a physical cause and physical solution,
Right.
and
You
so
you've heard of the body keeps a score?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Professor Bessel van der Kolk, yes.
Yeah, such a great book because he's so good at explaining how this works, because everyone we're such a physical, touchy, you got to see it in front of you type of culture and society. So if it's invisible, if it's not obvious to people, then they don't think anything's there. And I know you have experienced this too, Wendy. Many of the patients that we have that have these chronic, I don't want to call them debilitating, but they are kind of debilitating chronic health issues. Many of them, they look fine. Like on the outside, they look great, right? But it's in the inside where everything is happening, which you don't see underneath the surface. Because if you walk around and someone is like looking really ill and sick and they're on death's door, there's no doubt that there's something wrong with them, right? But when you see someone who looks great, they're healthy, I mean, overall, they look fantastic. But then the doctors kind of almost don't believe them that there's anything wrong with them, because on the outside they look good. You've experienced that, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of, lots of examples of that. You can say like a bodybuilder even, they're really not healthy on the inside. They look great, on the outside to some people. But not healthy on the inside as an example. And so so how did your like peers respond to this? So when they hear that you're addressing food sensitivities, which there's many things can be addressed with emotional trauma release, what was kind of your peers' response?
It depends on the peer, right? So there are certain doctors that, I don't want to say poo-poo it, but they go, yeah, whatever. Okay, whatever you say. Um, Others go, well, that's interesting. And then when I give them some more, background, case studies, I give them some explanation of like kind of what you and I talked about. They kind of go, that makes sense. But still, a lot of them don't address it because they don't have the tools to do that. So again, if people in the functional world, they're trying to deal with stress. Again, what do they generally use? They'll use things to support the adrenals. They'll use adrenal supplementation. They'll use adaptogens, adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha, panax ginseng, all that stuff. And that's how they deal with the stress. But they don't actually have a tool to actually address the stress connection with the food intolerance. So it's all across the board. So some are receptive, some aren't. Some are like, yeah, that's great, but then they don't really do much with that. And so because actually working on it and finding these things, it can be quite challenging.
So, this episode is brought to you by Chef's Foundry. They've got a fantastic line of cookware called P600. It's totally non toxic. I think people don't realize that when they're cooking, most people's cookware is adding toxins to their healthy food, that people spend so much money on healthy organic food and then cook it in toxic cookware. And so that includes cast iron, which I do not recommend. It adds way too much iron in a form that we can't absorb. People use aluminum cookware, which is very inexpensive, and it's used at most restaurants, giving us tons of aluminum. People are also using ceramic cookware, which can leach toxins into your food. And not to mention the nonstick cookware. It just has so many PFAS or PFAS that is so toxic. It's one of the forever chemicals. So you really have to pay attention to what you're cooking in. So that's why I recommend the P600 line by Chef's Foundry, so that you can have peace of mind when you're cooking and you're not getting any nasty chemicals like lead or cadmium or nickel or PFAS in your healthy food. You can get a special discount for my listeners by going to bit.ly/Myers Detox. So that's bit.ly/Myers Detox, Myers Detox, to get an exclusive discount just for my listeners. I want you to be thinking about what you're cooking your food in, and I highly recommend the P600 line by Chef's Foundry. Yes, and so can you talk to us about a protocol that you use, like maybe that people can do at home? Are there things like at home people can try?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I realized is in order to get rid of these food intolerances or address these food intolerances and sensitivities, people actually had to come and see me in person. Like I'd have to have them in front of me. We'd have to do all the work in front of, in person. And then there was a point a few years ago where there was someone that was in my life that needed some help. And there was no one around them that did the type of work I did, and they were pretty much halfway across the world. And so I was looking into, well, maybe there's a way I can do like a self-care thing, like a DIY type of protocol. And I started playing around and started experimenting. And then I actually discovered a technique, a protocol that was actually pretty effective. Now, I do have to say, seeing me in person is probably gets at more of the complex things, the ones that are kind of hard to do. But for your more uh, simple, more rudimentary food sensitivities and intolerances, this protocol I developed is really really works well. And it's quick and easy. You can do it at home. It's not invasive. And it just involves like following almost like a recipe, if you will.
Okay, great. And so where can people go to get that technique or that protocol?
Oh, great. It's I have a website. It's called emotionalallergy.com. And it talks a little about me, talks a little about the concept of emotional allergies. Again, when we say allergy, we mean intolerances, sensitivities, food, adverse food reactions. So they're all kind of lumped into one group. And really, it's not about those anaphylactic type of food allergies where you're going to need an EpiPen or you're going to go to the hospital. We definitely don't recommend using my protocol for that. But all these other things where you're actually being, inflamed by foods and it's causing these other chronic issues. But if you go to emotionalallergy.com, there's a tab that says course, and you can find that there.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so you do have a course that you can get $100 off coupon, correct?
Yes,
Yes, is
yes.
that you can go to emotionalallergy.com/Wendy and get that $100 off coupon to take your course, which I think would be so invaluable because I think so like almost everyone has some type of food sensitivity, some food that they know that they can't eat, or I have clients that come to me and they can only eat 5 foods, and that it's certainly well beyond just immune system malfunction. I mean, there's, like we've discussed, there's so many different underlying root causes, including that emotional trauma component and negative emotion component. So I think this type of work is going to be helpful not just for food sensitivities, but for a whole host of symptoms and health issues and diagnoses, including your mental health and stress levels as well. I mean, it really pays dividends to do this emotional trauma work that everyone really needs to do at some point on their health journey. Eventually, they trip over a course like yours, or find some information and realize that they need to do this work to get to that next level of health that they're aiming for.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I'd have to add is, remember when we talked in the very beginning about how your system's overloaded? So one of the things that makes even what I do more effective is we can actually kind of de-stress their body. So one of the things that's really effective and what I do in practice is we do things like liver detoxification because we need to get those toxins and all that crap in the body out of the body so the body can work easier, so it's more efficient, it can do everything it's supposed to do. So that's one thing. And then if people have things like leaky gut, so if they can repair the leaky gut, that would actually help their system operate better as well. If they have blood sugar issues, right, they should try and solve that as well. So if you can get all these fundamental root systems, foundational systems working better, then your immune system's also going to work better. It's not going to have to fight as much, and it's more resilient and more tolerant to things. So my even though my protocols I think really effective, but you still should do all that other essential work.
Yeah, I've heard of when people do liver flushes, they have a lot of food sensitivities and things that will dramatically reduce or disappear because your liver's kind of your front line of your immunity. So definitely clearing that goes a long way to fixing a lot of other problems downstream that are created by a congested liver. Well, Ray, thanks so much for joining us on the Myers Detox podcast. Do you have any parting words or maybe anything that we haven't addressed yet, or parting words for the audience?
No. Again, if they can just understand that rather than just looking for quick fixes and band-aids, to maybe look deeper, to look for root causes. The one thing I would say a lot of patients, I think they get more than anything when they come see guys like me, functional doctors, is we kind of give them a semblance of control that they actually have a lot to do with the direction of their health. So it isn't like you're just going to take this pill the rest of your life, or we're going to cut this organ out, or we're going to replace something in your body, because in our world we believe your body's smart. It's just been kind of been off course for a while, and so we're going to help you be the captain of your own ship and kind of know how to steer your ship in the right direction, which has been kind of off course for a while. So, yeah, there's hope for people out there. It isn't just drugs and surgery, and I would suggest that they try and look into these approaches to take back control of their health and the direction of their wellness.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Ray, thanks so much for coming on the show and for your words of wisdom. And I love talking about emotional trauma and emotional trauma release. It's something that like I said before, it's just so fundamental, and it's something that you need to do and work on at some point on your health journey to resolve not only food sensitivities, but many other things as well. So it's very, very much worth looking into and exploring, especially with a very experienced practitioner like yourself. So thanks for coming on the show. And everyone, I'm Dr. Wendy Myers. Thanks for tuning in to the Myers Detox podcast, where we have experts more around the world talking about, very, very cutting edge topics on health. We don't really do the basics here. We do more advanced topics in health because my goal with this show is to really give you those pieces of the puzzle that you've been searching for and really haven't found the answers in other places so that you can, enjoy the health that you deserve. So thanks for tuning in.
The Myers Detox podcast is created and hosted by Wendy Myers. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Wendy Myers and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.